All right, let's talk about something we all think about, crime in India. You see this one big number in the headlines, and it tells a certain story. But what happens when you look closer at what's actually happening on the ground, in our cities? Well, that's where the real story is. So let's get into it.
Look, this isn't just about some dry statistic. It's about our sense of safety, right? It's that feeling you get walking home at night or when you see a local news alert pop up on your phone. We're always hearing about this single national crime rate, but for a country as massive and diverse as India, can one number ever really tell the whole truth? Let's dig in and find out.
So here it is, the big number. Around 445, that's the official national crime rate. We're talking 445 reported crimes for every 100,000 people. And what's interesting is, for the past few years, that number has barely moved. On paper, it looks like a picture of stability. A situation that's, well, under control. But is it really?
Okay, let's dive into this, because that stable average feels kind of reassuring, doesn't it? But here's the thing. A national average is like a 30,000-foot view. What happens when we zoom right in? When we get down to the street level in some of India's biggest cities? That's where the official story starts to unravel. And a much more interesting and honestly more important one begins.
Yeah, to get the real story, you gotta hit the streets. Because the data coming directly from city police departments, it tells a completely different and, frankly, a far more urgent tale.
So, first stop, Delhi. In just the first few months of 2024, local police data showed that burglary cases shot up by nearly 30%. I mean, 30%. Now, that doesn't exactly scream stability, does it? That's a huge spike in a crime that hits people right where they live, shaking their sense of security at home.
And listen, this isn't just a Delhi problem. Let's head over to Mumbai. What's the story there? A significant rise in street crimes. We're talking about things like snatching. These are those random public acts that make you look over your shoulder, that change the way you move through your own city. Are you starting to see the pattern here?
Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting, because it's not just about the amount of crime. It's about the type of crime. In Gurgaon, the big story is a surge in cybercrime complaints. So all of a sudden, the threat isn't just on the street anymore. It's in your pocket. It's on your laptop. We're talking about a whole new digital frontier for crime.
And this slide right here, it perfectly shows how tricky these numbers can be. Take Visakhapatnam. The big headline number, overall crime, actually went down. Sounds great, right? A win for the city. Except, buried inside that positive trend was a really disturbing spike in murders. It's the perfect example of how one simple overall number can hide a much more frightening reality.
So here is the puzzle we have to solve. We've got burglaries, street crimes, cybercrime, and even murders spiking in major cities. And yet, the national rate is flat. How is that possible? How can both of these things be true at the same time? The two stories just don't seem to add up.
Well, the answer isn't in any single number. It's in understanding that the entire landscape of crime in India is changing. It's not just growing, it's shifting, it's evolving. And to see the full picture, we have to follow those shifting tides.
And here is the absolute crucial point. You have to look at crime as two separate streams. In one stream, you have some of the traditional violent crimes, and nationally, their growth is kind of mixed, sometimes even slow. But in the other stream, you have digital and economic crime. And that stream, it isn't just flowing, it's a raging river. It is one of the fastest growing categories of crime, and it's fundamentally changing the entire balance.
The second piece of the puzzle is simple geography, the urban-rural divide. Think of it like this. Cities are natural crime hotspots. You've got more people, more police, and more reporting. A big fire in a city is a major event, but when you average that fire's heat across the entire country, including these vast rural areas with far fewer fires, well, the national temperature barely changes. Those intense city spikes just get diluted by the sheer scale of the country.
And a line from the source material really hits this nail on the head. It says, local data gives us insight into what's happening regionally, but it's not directly comparable to the national figures. That's really just the expert way of saying you're comparing apples to oranges. The national number isn't a lie, not at all. It's just a completely different measurement. It can't possibly capture the lived reality of someone in Delhi or Mumbai.
So after all that, what does this actually mean? What should we take away from this deep dive into the numbers? Okay, let's break it down real simple. If you remember nothing else from this, remember these three things. First, that one big national number you always see in the headlines, it can hide a lot more than it reveals, so be skeptical. Second, crime isn't just growing, it is fundamentally changing. The biggest battles are increasingly being fought online. And third, and this is the most important one, the real story, the one that affects your daily life, isn't in the national average. It's in the local data. That's where the truth is.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. For generations, we've thought of a safe city as a place with safe streets. But if the biggest emerging threat lives on our phones and can attack our bank accounts from halfway across the world, is our entire definition of what makes a city safe completely out of date? Definitely something to think about.